Today we speak with Clent Baker. He is the founder of Papa Jesus, a cannabis brand focused on clean and organic flower cultivation. He entered the cannabis scene in the late 90s, and in 2016, inspired by his father's health improvement through cannabis, Clent left his corporate position to dive into the commercial cannabis sector. With over 20 years of corporate experience at McKinsey, AT&T, Verizon, overseeing operations exceeding of $11 billion, Clent refocused his business acumen to his brand, establishing it in Portland in 2016. Papa Jesus later relocated to Oklahoma City in April 2019, where it operates today. Clent remains hands-on, actively participating in day-to-day operations and community events. His commitment extends beyond profits. Clent aims to build a sustainable culture in the cannabis industry through collaboration and close work with others. He seeks to elevate industry standards, actively engaged in community events, also promoting the responsible practices of cannabis, as well as blending his passion for the plant with strategic business acumen. Welcome to the Activate Your Audience podcast, Clent.
Thank you, Lewis. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So let's kick it right off. What is maybe a quick summary or a high level cliff notes of your journey from, the corporate world to cannabis, and specifically talking maybe about the marketing landscape of cannabis as that journey, has transcended from late 90s to where we're at now in 2024.
Absolutely. So growing up in Texas, I graduated high school in 1994. Really wasn't active in the cannabis until after high school, and being from Texas, being in a state where it was highly illegal, everything had to be kind of covert, underground. So for me, I started growing in a closet in a bedroom, really just because I got tired of paying high prices for weed in Texas, and the quality just wasn't there. But my late cousin, he and I had ventured over to Amsterdam in early 2000s, sourced genetics over there, and just really fell in love with the variety of genetics, the different cultivation techniques, and really started self-learning and self-growing along that process. Back then, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there simply just wasn't any type of marketing, branding, or really any mainstream around cannabis at the time. It was hard to source genetics. It was hard to get equipment, light, soil, anything, especially in Texas. You didn't have necessarily the internet sources that you have today, where you can go source seeds. You can order equipment. We didn't have that. We had to piece it together and essentially learn on our own. Things changed. I had a family, got married, and had to step away from necessarily growing in risk of something illegally happening to me. Didn't want to go to jail, especially being in Texas with a family. So I ventured into the corporate world. I'm in my early 20s, making good money, and learning my way through the corporate structure. And it taught me a lot, right? It taught me leadership, management, working with others. It gave me a lot of those skills that really helped migrate into the cannabis business side of today. So when you look at, we talked about in the intro, my dad's health, which is what led me to it. I spent years in the corporate world and did very, very well, very successful, but I felt the universe was pushing me to make a change, right? My dad was given 18 months to live, and I decided to step back out of the corporate world and spend more time with family. Life is very valuable, very short. So during that time, my brothers and I started giving my dad cannabis. He's always been a big smoker since I can remember, 5 years old and, younger. He's always been a smoker. But with his work, he couldn't consume cannabis for years. They did random drug tests, and if he failed a drug test, he'd lose his job, he'd lose his health insurance, everything that was essential to really keeping him alive, right? So it got to a point to where there really wasn't much else he could do as far as healing. He was on over 20 prescription pills at the time, given the 18 months to live. And he said, you know what? I'm tired of this. Let's try cannabis. So we loaded him up with high CBD tinctures, RSO, started getting cannabis back in the system, and slowly, month over month, he started dropping those prescription pills. And during this time, I'd already left the corporate world, was spending time with my parents more, and just kind of took a break from the world, right? It was just moving really fast, very stressful. Well, my dad had found some seeds in some of the weed that we got him. So he dug out my old grow lights. I don't know how they still had them, but he had them. and he started growing in his closet.
Okay.
And so his mind started focusing on growing this plant rather than I'm dying.
Mm.
So that change in mindset really made him healthy. He started eating, he started doing push-ups. So I saw that and I took that as a sign. You know what? This is my calling right now. I have to find a way how to venture into the cannabis world to be able to help others the same as it's helped my dad. So one thing led to another. I applied for many jobs in the cannabis market, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, California. But because my background was all corporate driven, no one would hire me. I couldn't put on there that I grew weed in my closet for 10 years in Texas, right? Everything was
Right.
corporate driven. I finally got an interview for a COO position of new dispensaries that are opening in the Portland, Oregon metro. The interview really pushed me to create a full-on business plan. So I researched that market, understood what it would take. Basically, if I was owning that business, this is everything I would need to know. I didn't get the job, obviously, but that interview is what pushed me to say, you know what, no one's hiring me. I'm going to figure out how to do this myself. So going back to the marketing aspect of it, when I went to Oregon, this is in 2016, 2017. Cannabis was really kind of taking a forefront in terms of mainstream. You had the Jungle Boys in California who were doing an amazing job with their branding and marketing. Cookies was kind of coming forward with their exotic lines, and then you also had some of the breeders. Like the one that really influenced me with some of the artwork that I put towards the branding was Mutant Genetics.
Okay.
So I looked to find that artists who did their artwork, and going into the Oregon market, there's some phenomenal growers in that region. And for me going in there, being inexperienced in a sense, as far as large scale cultivation goes, I knew I had to do something different that set me apart from the others. Because if everybody's growing phenomenal product out there, what am I going to have to do to kind of really compete but bring something different? So when I studied that market, no one was really coming forward with branding. There really wasn't any hot brands out there, and a lot of people running a lot of the same genetics. So I used that influence I was getting from the West Coast, from Cali Jungle Boys, from Mutant Genetics, and started putting artwork around the strains that I was going to release to market to bring attention to it, but also be able to be creative in a sense and give people something different than just really good flower. So times have changed. There's absolutely more brands that are on the market now, which is really nice to see. So it's more than just having great product. You also have to have that strong brand presence.
Yeah, man. No, I mean, there's so much there. I want to maybe start off with the idea of whether it was then or now, right? With facing your dad's journey and just that real sobering idea, as cliche as it is, we know life is short and how finite time is, yet we'll slave away, in certain work or in certain ways of living for cash or for status or for these things that are actually not as finite as life, right? You could essentially get more cash. You could essentially, develop yourself, but for whatever reason, it's not until it really hits us that we start to put a value on the actual thing that is the most valuable thing, which is time. And through that journey, what I heard you kind of as an undertone there is just brand is one of those things that, we understand that we're storytelling, story loving creatures. And so when it comes to leveraging time as an entrepreneur, or even as an employee or somebody trying to shift industries, transition, obviously add more years to your life, whether you have a terminal diagnosis or whether you're just, especially that's the trend now, right? Longevity and where we're looking at. One of the best leverage points in business is brand, right? Like if you put a certain amount of work into something, whether it's cultivating a plant or a business or a child's, development, you are essentially making a bet for the long term. And it's changing now, but brand is one of those things that have been hard to measure because it is such a long term, lag indicator of a valuable brand. And so why wouldn't, just the same way that we would say, I'm going to decide at 40 or 50 or whatever diagnosis point, or even early on, to invest in something like our skill set. Just like you did this market research, obviously it was for a job and it was for transition, but that was your investment into where I'd imagine Papa Jesus is now, right? Mm-hmm. And similarly for us business owners and brand owners and people in the marketing world and events world, there is this real, I think, thing that we understand, but we sometimes forget, whether in our personal life or in our business, of the long-term investment of a brand and the leverage point that it provides us. So what does that tell us? If life is finite, if, there's competition out there, let's put in our work into this thing that will then pay dividends. Maybe not now, maybe not in a couple of years. We don't often know, but in a sense of that. So my question to that is like, how, I guess, have any of maybe your experiences within the corporate world when it comes to like branding or marketing, how has that maybe influenced your approach, whether it comes to leverage or managing, or again, extending time horizon of the impact that either the brand or the business can have?
Sure. I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, branding is critical really for any business, and it takes time to establish that. I've been building this brand for essentially, 8 years now, right? And it takes time, and as long as you stay true to your vision, and you have a passion, and it goes back to having a story, and having a story that people can connect with, right? And that they can relate to, for me, example, Papa Jesus, that's my dad's nickname, right? And the slogan is everybody needs a little Papa Jesus, which Papa Jesus can be in terms a definition for cannabis. So everybody needs a little cannabis for whatever reason it may be, for their mental health, for just to feel good through the day, productivity. Maybe they have some sort of illness or ailment. So when you look at the corporate world, you look at a lot of big corporations, Coca-Cola. You'll take McKesson, for example. They've all started with that idea and vision from the original founders, and they've built that over time. And it's no different in the cannabis world either. You have to have a brand that people are going to recognize and relate to, have that story behind it, have the passion and vision behind it. McKesson, for example, one of the largest wholesale pharmaceutical distributors in the world. The founder, John McKesson, this is the company that's probably close to 200 years old now, started out importing leeches from Europe, importing, exporting leeches back and forth from Europe. That's how they started with that. And they actually used cannabis in a lot of their medicine back in, when they first originally founded. So that was something that built off of the founder's name, and that still carries forward today from John McKesson. So it's really, regardless of the size of your business, small, corporate, you still have to have that vision, and you have to have a brand that people recognize and can relate to. So for me, being able to transition from that corporate side of it, I was able to really understand a company of such scale and take a lot of those same skill sets, a lot of those same ideas, the visions, the missions that we were instilled with from day one in a lot of trainings, and carry that over into the cannabis space. And that's, one of the areas that I really want to focus on this year as being more of an educator and speaking at conferences, around the country this year, is to really bring in other industry leaders and really focus on not only how can we change the stigma around cannabis usage, but also how can we bridge the cultural gap that you have between, your legacy operators who have been doing it in a sense illegally because they've had to do it illegally for decades, especially like in California, the West Coast, because, they've been pushed that direction, and bridge that cultural gap with today's, business landscape of the corporate driven, where you have to have that branding, you have to have the operating procedures in place, you have to have that business acumen and the structure. So right now there's somewhat of a disconnect between the two cultures, and it's we have to bridge that and bring it together if we want to have a very sustainable industry in the cannabis space. And it goes no different than alcohol or even pharmaceuticals. They all started at the prohibition level, and they've had to bring that into more of that business structure today to get it to where it's at. So, with cannabis being a new industry, there's a lot of opportunity for that. It's just going to take time, but it's also going to go back to understanding how each other works, coming together, and also building a solid brand with that culture behind it.
Yeah, no, and that's huge because again, culture, as we know, is even more important in today's day and age where we have, internet and the internet and all sorts of different ways in which you can go into microcosms of different tribes, of different communities, of, niching down. But even in, say, a commodity, right, like coffee or cannabis or any other thing that is, traded as a commodity, that brand differentiation is not only, as you say, key to making a solid business, right? Something that will stand the test of time, but also can create positive movement for the sake of, like you said, nurturing disconnects. As you mentioned, if you look at the war on drugs and a lot of what the legacy growers and folks who were penalized for something that somebody, a venture capital firm, or just the massive investors of the world can just come in and kind of undercut sort of that suffering, or that like even you going through this sort of training, and early on not being applicable to what you wanted to do, even though you had gotten your so-called masters maybe in the field, but because it was with this gray or dark zone to it, there's a lot of disadvantages there, that if you are, again, catapulting both culture with this power to heal as a community, right? Specifically, once we start getting into incarceration rates and the pros and cons of the pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of opportunity there, not just for tax dollars and for upward mobility for communities, for our economy, but also for the sake of, making sure that some of these problems that have continued, mass incarceration, neighborhoods being just bombarded with over policing, loss of our tax dollars to unproductive, means, and giving people an opportunity, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what sort of, expertise they have, proving themselves in the market. Obviously, proving the integrity of that kind of thing is important. So, I love that, man. And I think, again, going back to maybe the market itself and marketing and branding a bit more, what have been some challenges specifically? You mentioned, obviously, when you started differentiating with some of the artwork, what have been some other challenges as far as differentiating with what is now, a very crowded market, and also just an industry that is constantly not just facing, competition from within itself, but, the regulated sector, all of the craziness, right, at the legislative level, for cannabis. How do you differentiate and tackle all of that within this crowded market?
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's changing daily. It seems like, especially year over year. We'll take this last year. 2023 was a very tough year for cannabis operators across the nation. We saw a lot of dropouts. We saw a lot of price drops. A lot of changes were taking place. So for me, it's again, staying true to my vision. Staying firm with my beliefs, and don't work hard to not compromise the integrity of the brand. When you're seeing prices drop all around you because, operators, cultivators are getting desperate to sell product to pay the bills, it's challenging to keep your price points where you feel they should be, right? And that makes it extremely difficult, because now you have, like you said, in the overcrowded market, you have more operators now coming in that are lowering their prices. So you have dispensaries who are snatching up as cheap as they can get on flower. So it's flooding the shelves. So it's how do you stay ahead of that when you have dispensaries who are getting, similar product, maybe not the same quality, but it still sells on their shelves for, $400 or $500 cheaper per pound than yours, without compromising integrity. So it's really, I think it just goes to communication, right? It's communicating with others in the industry, your peers, and kind of understanding where that sweet spot and that price point is to adjust down to the market, to where it doesn't take it below the threshold of where it really should be for the type of quality you're putting out, right? And that's where brand power comes into play, because the ones who are having to drop their price points at extremely low are coming into the market overproducing with no branding, whereas the ones who have the branding are the ones keeping that higher price point, because their brand is known, it sells. Dispensaries want it still. The patients want it, customers want it. So that's the big difference there, is when you have branded versus unbranded, is you're able to still retain a higher price point. Now, as far as dealing with the challenges and everything with compliance, regulations, I think it's critical for any business, licensed business, as well as patients and customers, to attend the forums and town halls that the state puts together. The Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, OMA, out here, they do town halls every once in a while, where they go over the new regulation changes. It's an open forum for questions, and it's a good way to stay on top of what's coming down the pipeline, but also build those relationships with key people at the state level who make a lot of these decisions.
Yeah.
Stay tied into your legislators. They're the ones that are approving a lot of these bills that are coming from the Senate that make changes that impact us down the road. So it's really just staying in tune, communicating, being part of community events, being involved in the community, talking with your peers, and really you're just doing your best to stay ahead of any changes that are coming. It's real easy to get behind if you're not staying on top of these changes that do come forth.
Yeah, man, that's a challenge, but it makes a lot of sense. Again, when we're talking about brand or even the community aspect, it sounds like you are consciously not just providing obviously the value to the market and doing the business side of things, but also recognizing that it impacts the community at so many levels that having that sort of, like you said, dialogue and conversation is essential for that. And even with, I wanted to ask you a bit about the journey going from, say, Portland to Oklahoma City. What have been some insights maybe for either strategic decisions behind the move or even within working alongside the community as you've been there that has impacted Papa Jesus with both the community engagement as well as the operational and the brand reach?
Absolutely. The Portland was really good. I enjoyed it out there. For the first couple of years. I started going through the licensing process. My business plan was to go out there and open a dispensary. That's what I started doing, was open a dispensary. I spent the whole summer out there walking the streets, looking for properties. I had letters of intent on several retail locations that kept falling through. It was just a crowded market. Dispensaries everywhere. They had regulations in place where you couldn't be 1,000 foot from another dispensary, and the market was just tight, especially in the Portland metro. And I had to flip that script and find cultivation and decide to go into cultivation. The plan was to open a dispensary, wait about a year and a half, generate some capital from that, and then acquire a cultivation facility and go straight vertical alignment, vertical integration. Because I spent so much time, the dispensary was falling through, I decided to go ahead and go into cultivation. So I found a property. The guy was building a kind of a cannabis park in a sense. He had 56 acres. They were putting facility buildings out there. They were handling all the construction. They were putting solar power. Everything sounded beautiful. Everything looked good. Turns out the guy was taking investment dollars that's supposed to go into the property and using it for personal, upwards of $32 million. So I ended up losing close to $400,000 in Oregon. And I'd already started my genetics, started pheno hunting, and I had 300 beautiful plants going, and and they were supposed to be timed at the same timing when about facility and license was supposed to be ready. So I had to figure out what to do with all this. And fortunately, I was able to to link up with a friend out there that had a licensed operation, was able to continue my pheno hunting, still building the brand. People in Oregon, and especially the Portland metro, were excited about the brand, new genetics coming to market. I started launching some of the merchandise around that with some of the strain art. So people were excited about it. I was excited about it, but I had to pivot, right? And that's one thing that I've learned about in the cannabis industry is you have to be on your toes and be ready to pivot, or you're just going to pretty much fall out, right? So I had to figure out what to do. That change in pace, that disruption, was actually a blessing. It pushed me down here to the Oklahoma market. To where I was able to get licensed within a week. And if I had waited 4 more months to move down here, I wouldn't have been able to get licensed because of the residency requirement. So at the time that I got licensed here in April of 2019, the regulations, the rules were a lot different than they are today. There wasn't a 2-year residency requirement. We didn't have all the certificate of compliance and certificate of occupancies and all these inspections and requirements that we have today. So I was able to get licensed very quickly and get up and running a lot faster than I was in Oregon. So it was actually a blessing. It brought me closer home to Texas. I was able to take the brand that I started building, genetics I started building in Oregon, and bring that into the Oklahoma market, which actually got me up and running and more visibility in this market a lot faster than having to start from scratch out here in Oklahoma. So I'm very thankful for it. So that it was actually, like I said, a blessing to get me down here. The transition was smoother than what I expected, and I'm very grateful for it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's, the old Stoic adage of the obstacle's the way, right? That thing
Hmm.
that impends you can be the thing that can help you. And that's obviously something that is a key mantra for any business, but
Sure.
specifically in something as tenuous as the cannabis space. So let's talk about, our last question in terms of back to commitment to, reshaping the perception of cannabis and promoting its responsible use. How have you, or can you share any specific initiatives or strategies that Papa Jesus has undertaken to, help with, as you talked earlier, whether it's merging old cultures and the new world that we are in of sorts, as well as destigmatizing the perception of it. How have you kind of gone about addressing that in today's landscape?
Sure. It really comes down to just educating, right? Is just sharing knowledge, educating, talking with people who are non-cannabis users, um, and also talking with people who are cannabis users. You see a lot of school teachers, a lot of elderly people, a lot of baby boomers, right? A lot of baby boomers who were fed, the whole pharmaceutical prescriptions. They were part of that whole reefer madness that cannabis is bad, cannabis is evil. So a lot of them stayed away from that because of what the information they were fed.
Right.
And that's my parents' generation. So I think it gets back. It's just having those conversations with these individuals, especially in a state like Texas, and showing them that cannabis isn't just about a hippie out by the river smoking weed all day getting high, right? Yeah, people are going to use that. It's recreational. But when you look at the deeper benefits of it, there's other ways to consume cannabis other than smoking a joint. You have tinctures, you have RSO, you have edibles, you have topicals, balms, you have other products that are out there that are very beneficial for people who may, not be able to smoke, because of their lungs or whatever. They may just not like the smell. So there's other ways that they can ingest or use cannabis for health benefits other than smoking. So it's just sharing that knowledge, educating them on the usage of it, and keep in mind cannabis isn't for everyone, and I think that's something to always put out there when having these conversations, that it's not for everyone. It may not be for you, um, but don't look at it as being something negative because of what you've been told. People are using it. Millions of people are using it across the world for all types of different elements. And for me, it's just okay. How do we continue changing that stigma and changing that perception, and presenting cannabis as being just as socially acceptable as having a glass of wine or drinking a glass of scotch or something. And I think that comes down into really how can we as businesses start shaping our marketing campaigns to kind of capture that. For me, you look at some of these campaigns that some of your big whiskey, tequila companies do, right? They're mixing drinks, they're showing consumption like in a backyard, grilling, barbecue. So how can we take some of those same elements from these marketing campaigns that alcohol does and present that in cannabis? People sitting around out back in a campfire smoking a joint, or eating a bag of edibles there, or something that portrays cannabis being used in a social setting. That's going to help really change that perception as well. So it's really just getting out there, getting involved in community, doing charity donations. For church organizations, school organizations, showing that we are giving back to the community. Yes, we're a cannabis business, but this cannabis is no dangerous than anything else that people consume, such as pharmaceuticals or even alcohol. We're giving back. We're doing we're doing really good things for the people that any other company should be doing. So it's just getting out there, educating, sharing knowledge, helping, and just working daily to change that perception and stigma.
Yeah, it's a continuous thing, and I definitely think, going forward, specifically with this intention, we're going to get to this as a society, but definitely, whether it's a regional thing, a state thing, obviously a national thing at some level.
Sure.
So definitely rooting for you on that journey, brother.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to highlight just some of the points that I kind of stood out to me, and then you feel free to put in anything that I may be missing.
Okay.
So I'll start off with the idea of maybe growing and expanding as we look at life in general, as time, whether it's as entrepreneurs or just as human beings with finite bodies, remembering that we could put or prioritize rather the thing that is really finite, which is our time. And so doing that, whether it's with leveraging a brand or with, growing a business that we also learn how to not micromanage, right? And empower other people. And that journey of just really taking initiative to value our time is huge, not just for personal life, but obviously for business. And that leads to the next point of, this idea of brand as leverage. So if we look at brand stories, if we look at the effort or the value or the investment that you can put into anything within a business, definitely putting into the brand will be something that will optimize you back time and really differentiate specifically amongst, your crowded markets. The next point is about keeping brand integrity and kind of stopping this race to the bottom with, again, any commodity. We know that if the market or competitors are just trying to, for whatever the reasons, as you said, maybe they need to survive, if they're just dropping prices, it's a very courageous and sometimes risky thing to kind of keep that integrity, to making sure that the culture or the sector or things as a whole aren't racing to the bottom, because anytime that we're competing on price, we are always going to lose to somebody's going to lower it, and that can go again to zero, right? So I think it's very a good reminder to just, again, maintaining integrity, which comes maintaining a belief in your product and yourself, which again requires you building that up, building yourself up, building the business up, building the brand and the product to be good. And then lastly, I think just, like any of these journeys, whether it's in entrepreneurship, whether it's in transitioning from any part of life, from an industry to another, just being malleable, rolling with the punches. The move from Portland to Oklahoma wasn't exactly what you wanted in the first place, but as you said, there's these blessing in disguise. And even now, I think as we look at a regulated industry as it is, and as you mentioned, other industries and sectors that have gone through this, prohibition in alcohol, pharmaceuticals, like there are things that come from this if we are creative, if we are with integrity. There are people that will take shortcuts in any industry, and that comes to an end. There are places and times where, your big pharmas will pay the price, right? Depends, right? At some point, there is a karma that is returned. So I think having that sort of malleability, as well as just, paying attention to what is your journey in your lane, helps you take the punches that, are just inevitable. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think you hit it all right on the head. I mean, that's a great summary of everything, right? It encompasses, I think, what we see in this industry as a whole, and not just this industry, but also at the corporate level from other companies like pharmaceutical, alcohol, right? And it goes back to, really the credibility, the integrity, the branding, everything that you pointed out. So yeah, I think this is great, great summary. I appreciate the opportunity, Luis. I really do.
My pleasure, brother. Anything that we can follow, anything that, if we want to learn more, where can we find you?
Absolutely. You can find on Instagram at Papa Jesus Farms. Our website is papajesusfarms.com. My personal Instagram is at Clent B. Clent spelled Clent. I'm also going to be speaking around the country this year, different conferences, MJ BizCon this upcoming year. I'll post updates on Instagram so everyone can keep up to date with that. Here in Oklahoma City, you can find me locally. Find me at some local events. We have a Cincy Connects event next Thursday. That's going to be great. So yeah, that's it.
Love it, brother. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
and
you.
looking forward to connecting again.
You bet.